Good morning, everyone from Paris. Welcome, everybody. We would like to start now this launch event for the Public Development Banks for Water initiative. My name is Sophie Trémollet. I'm the OECD Environment Water Team Lead. So the objective of this session are threefold. One is to formally announce the launch of the Public Development Banks for Water initiative, which is being led by the OECD under Finance in Common. We will, of course, present how this initiative builds upon the Water Finance Coalition's earlier work and achievements. It has been a Public Development Banks Coalition successively chaired by AFD, CAF, and Banobras. And then we will hear from PDBs, both national public development banks and international financial institutions, about their experience with financing water security and how the Public Development Banks for Water initiative could potentially help them accelerate their work in this area. So there's a few housekeeping rules. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording and slides, if you're happy with that, will be shared with attendees and on LinkedIn. In terms of asking questions, please use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen. These questions, if you address to a particular speaker, please make that clear, and they will be addressed either during the webinar, at the end, or later by email. And please note that this session is conducted in English only. So we have two sessions today to cater for multiple time zones. This morning, we are very happy to welcome Lionel Goujon, who's the head of water and sanitation at Agence Française de Développement, who will speak about the Water Finance Coalition, what it has achieved and why it was launched and how this is effectively transformed into the Public Development Bank for Water initiative. We will then hear from Nathalie Layani, who's Chief Sustainability Officer at the Groupe Caisse des Dépôts in France, about the Caisse des Dépôts' experience with lending and supporting the water security field at large. Another public development bank at national level will then take the floor, Johan Lube, who's head of South Africa Water Partnership Office with the Development Bank of South Africa. And then we will hear from Juan Bofill-Maestre, who's lead engineer at the European Investment Bank, effectively about how the European Investment Bank is working with PDBs at national level. Very briefly, this is our speakers this afternoon. If you wish to come back this afternoon, and it will have more of a Latin American focus with CAF and Banobras, who were both co-chairs of the Water Finance Coalition jointly with AFD, and we will also hear from the Italian experience. And Walid Wazlati, head of Climate, Biodiversity and Water Division at the OECD Environment Directorate, will close this day of launch event. So I'm handing the floor now to Lionel Goujon, who will tell us more about the experience of AFD with the Water Finance Coalition. Over to you, Lionel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon to our Asian friends. I'm really very excited to be here with you today for this important launch of the Public Development Banks for Water initiative. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to look a little bit backwards to remind what we have achieved since for about 5 years already, and maybe to present how we see this evolution as an opportunity for our network. I would like to start reminding that Water Finance Coalition was created at the end of 2020 in the dynamics of the Finance in Common network. For those of you who do not know this network, I would like to remind that before 2020, actually, public development banks did not know precisely which community they were taking part in. We didn't know precisely how many public development banks there were across the world, and how much they would finance. So the Finance in Common initiative started to create a network and a community of these banks with now yearly meetings. The first one was in Paris in 2020, and the latest one was this year in 2025 in South Africa. As of today, we now have a more precise idea of the community that we represent. There are more than 330 public development banks members of this network, ranging from all sizes. They are the worldwide banks, like the World Bank, the regional banks, like for instance Asian Development Bank, but also national ones, bilateral partners, but also even like regional, smaller than national banks being part of that network. Altogether, these banks they represent 23 trillion US dollars of assets, and they finance about 2.5 trillion dollars of investment every year. So that is about 10% of the global investment worldwide. So this is really a strong community, and which is now trying to work better together. And in that context, some sector initiative were launched to try to have this bank working better at sector level. And so did we in the water sector with a call for action, which was published as soon as 2020 at the first fixed meeting. And four banks actually took part to this call for action. There was the European Investment Bank, the World Bank, CAF, as well as the French Development Agency, in cooperation with the Sanitation and Water for All, which, if you don't know, it is a UN initiative whose objective is to raise the profile of the water sector in the on the political agenda. So we started with a study to try to better understand who we were and what we are doing. So a study on the role of the banks, and specifically the national public development banks in the water sector, a study done by IRC, who has been our partner since the beginning. And that study underlined the fact that national PDBs were having a smaller share of activity in the water sector than the international ones. So most international ones, not all of them, but on average, be it the multilateral development banks or the bilateral development banks, we have about 10% of our activity in the water sector. But that's not the case overall. So if all banks had 10% of their activity, that would represent $250 billion per year. But we're far from that. So this is the rationale that we have been working so far, trying to develop the role of national public development banks. The Water Finance Coalition was more formally created next year in 2021, and has been chaired or co-chaired so far, I would say, by three key banks, CAF, Banobras, and AFD, who have been sharing the roles of chairs and co-chairs in the last few years. We also set up a secretariat, which was implemented by IRC from the Netherlands. And IRC has been supporting us for over 2 years in this endeavor, very efficiently, and I would like to thank them again for that. And this has been until the beginning, I would say, beginning of last year. Also, looking backwards, I could mention that in October 2021, in the second fixed meetings, we published a statement on financing water and sanitation in the Rome fixed event, which was also a key milestone for our coalition. And more recently, in December 2023, we published our strategic action plan for the Water Finance Coalition. So where are we today? We are a group of about 70 members. So being a member means you participate in our meeting, you take part in the reflection, and you support the vision that we have for the sector of reminding the role of public development banks. We communicate, we meet about three times per year, and also we have a strong participation in all major international events. So we participated in the Financing Commons Summit, but also in the UN Conference on Water in 2023, in the World Water Forum in Bali last year, in almost all World Water Weeks in Stockholm, also in the Cairo Water Weeks, or in the Global Water Summit. So I think the visibility of our coalition has been increasing quite a lot in the last few years. And also I would like to mention two key publications that have been done by the Water Finance Coalition. The first one was the Water Climate Finance Toolkit, whose objective was to support the banks in understanding better how to use climate finance for the water sector. And more recently, a study called Public Development Banks Investments in Water, which for the first time ever tries to give a reliable understanding of the amounts financed by public development banks in the water sector. It has been a complex work, but with very interesting figures in the end, which were first presented by President Macron last December at the One Water Summit. And well, roughly, we can say that today, public development banks represent about 50 billion US dollars of investment per year, with almost half of it being done by the China Development Bank, because we include banks from the south, even those having mostly a national mandate. But that figure is very important because it gives us a starting point to determine where we would like to go, and maybe to increase. I'm used to say that there's a five-fold increase potential if we were all financing 10% towards water amongst our global portfolio. So from now, why moving from the Water Finance Coalition to Public Development Banks for Water initiative? I would say that once we finalized our strategic action plan, we realized that we needed a new era if we wanted to keep growing and keep raising our ambitions. And so as soon as May 2024, I would say, in Bali, we started discussing how we could evolve and started considering working closer with the OECD, which had been a partner of the initiative so far, but more a silent one, as because not being a public development bank. So there was quite a consensus, I would say, amongst our members that OECD would be a relevant partner. And OECD very quickly showed its interest in working closer with the coalition of the public development banks. It took quite a while, actually, to make it happen, about a year, because we had to find a way of working together, taking account OECD's own requirements, and also making sure that we share a common perspective. I think from the public development banks, the idea was to make sure that we maintain PDBs for water as a network of banks, a community of banks, but also giving more responsibility to OECD so as to grow, accelerate our activity, and also raise the profile of it. I would mention at least three benefits that we consider in working closer with OECD. The first one clearly is the higher political visibility. We expect OECD to bring our voice stronger in international events, in the water sector, of course, but also in other sectors, because we know we have to promote the role of water outside of the water sector. So I'm sure OECD will have a tremendous contribution on that. We realized also that working with OECD would bring additional value to our members. Some of the national public development banks proved eager to have within our group the possibility of creating contacts with OECD. I think that is also a benefit that we could expect. And thirdly, I would mention the complementarity between the work of the former Water Finance Coalition and now PDBs for Water with other OECD programs in the water sector. Probably Sophie will detail that in more detail, but the roundtable, the observatory on financing in the water sector, which is an upcoming initiative. All these initiatives, they can complement itself, and there's real opportunities for cross-fertilization. So this is where we are now, and I'm very happy to hand over to Sophie to present us more in detail the objective of the new PDBs for Water initiative.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lionel. Thank you for the trust you're putting in us and this very good overview as well of what the Water Finance Coalition has achieved to date. So I will take you through a quick presentation to give you a little bit more background on the PDB for Water initiative and how it builds on the coalition. Let me share my screen. So just to put us in the context as well, this coalition and this initiative is really working at a cornerstone of development and through means which are the greatest reliance on public development banks. And that is a way of engagement that has been reiterated recently as part of a 2025 Sevilla commitment, which has stated that there is a need to rely on public development banks to a greater extent for domestic resource mobilization. And this focus is also likely to be reiterated in the context of the upcoming water events. You may be aware that in 2026, the United Nations will hold its second water conference in the UAE, and that will be followed by the Riyadh World Water Forum in 2027. And both of these events and global conversation is focused on how to finance the water sector, given that the needs are still very great. There is a water financing gap with more than 2 billion people lacking safely managed drinking water, 3.4 billion people lacking safely managed sanitation, and a high percentage, 10% of the global population living under high or critical water stress, with that number only likely to grow as the impacts of climate change are being felt through water. So there are some estimates of funding needs, which are been made by the World Bank, but just focused on SDG 6.1 and 6.2, which relates to water and sanitation. And that estimate is of 140 billion per year. But it's important to stress that in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal that is stated as SDG 6 for water security, there are many more investments that will need to be made in order to tackle floods, droughts, but also water pollution and the degradation of freshwater ecosystems. So the likely investment needs are much greater, but they haven't yet been estimated fully, I would state. So how does that compare with what PDBs are able to mobilize? Lionel made a reference to that. One of the activities of Finance in Common, which is the group that is bringing together all PDBs worldwide, is that there has been extensive mapping of who these PDBs are, what they are currently financing, and how much, what is their weight in total financing of world investment. So this is, you have a link to the database here, and an estimate is that they have about 23 trillion in total assets. So obviously very large, but that includes the very substantial share of the China Development Bank, but also big giants such as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in the US, which are effectively managing pension funds. But still, when we look at the role of national PDBs, that may be roughly about half of these 23 trillion. So a very substantial share of total investments. As Lionel also mentioned, we have reference points in terms of how much multilateral development banks are currently investing in water. So there's a report that just came out that showed that 10 MDBs, which have been bringing together their assets, or sort of looked at how much they are investing jointly. They estimated that they invest close to 20 billion in water in 2024. You will hear from the EIB later, which is part of that group. And in terms of share of their of water in that portfolio, this sort of varies between 6 to 25% for the Islamic development banks. So as Lionel was saying, the key objective of the PDB for Water initiative, building on the Water Finance Coalition, is to see how we can attract a greater share of the PDB's portfolio to the water sector, so that we can perhaps match what is currently being done by MDBs. We are not yet there, and the report that Lionel mentioned showed that there has been very significant investments by public development banks, but this assessment right now is kind of combining some very large investors, such as the China Development Bank, but also some MDBs. This is the results of a survey that has been carried out by the Water Finance Coalition. One key issue is that many national public development banks are not tracking their water investments, even though many have the achievement of SDG 6 very prominently featuring in their annual report. So one of the challenge will be to see how can we track also better how much PDBs are investing in water. So why PDBs? Why are we insisting on mobilizing greater financing from PDBs? Is because they have unique attributes which make them a key players in financing landscape. They tend to have a social mandate. They can offer long-term finance. Some of them, and we will hear from the Caisse des Dépôts example, can have access to national savings. So they have their own local resources, and they can provide domestic currency lending and expertise and knowledge in infrastructure. This is across the board, and you mentioned the synergies, Lionel, with the work of the OECD. The OECD has been doing work with PDBs for some time, looking at what can be their role for development, climate and biodiversity more generally, and what can be their role for blended finance. So what these reports have found is that PDBs can strengthen enabling environments at local and subnational levels. They can also invest in project preparation and pipelines, which is not something that commercial banks could typically do. Again, they found that they can provide local currency financing with longer tenure and access domestic capital markets, and play a role with mobilizing private finance by combining their public mandate, local presence, and ability to de-risk investments through blended finance. So they're a very important piece of the puzzle to extend financing and beyond, and private finance as well. So in terms of what we will do, you heard from Lionel about the Water Finance Coalition, what it has achieved, how it's functioned. And now I'll tell you a little bit more about the Public Development Banks for Water initiative. So we are keeping these three main sort of areas of work, which have been essential to the activities of the Water Finance Coalition. One is to create a community of practice so as to raise awareness about the water sector investment needs, but also what can be done in terms of blended finance, innovative financing schemes, which can be effective in terms of increasing the amount of finance to the water sector. And we will do that through building peer-to-peer networks and through regular outreach. A second component is the analytical work, because there is a lot to be learned still, a lot to be identified in terms of what works, what doesn't. And so we will do that through publications by the OECD, but drawing from the experience of all the participants in the initiative. And I'm glad to announce that one of the first pieces of analytics that we are planning to do will focus on how these public development banks can finance what in French we call the big water cycle, so effectively the restoration of freshwater ecosystems. And Nathalie will be able to tell us more about what is being done in France, because a number of these PDBs are already investing in this. And then last but not least, very importantly, we want to work at country level to support national PDBs scale up their investments, but do that through a mix of policy dialogues and peer-to-peer learning, because we're very conscious that in order to increase the role of PDBs, there needs to be greater awareness across the sector and across the financial actors about what this role can be. So engaging with ministries of water, environment, water companies, so that they can better understand how PDBs can help them is essential and very important, almost as important as to raise the awareness of PDBs themselves to the needs of the sector. So how will it work? It will be led and coordinated by the OECD, but we are looking really to foster active participation from what we will call the participants. So with a heavy emphasis on PDBs, Lionel mentioned we will build on the Water Finance Coalition network of 70 plus PDBs, but also other stakeholders, which could include governments, NGOs, academia, existing networks in the sector. We will have regular engagement, and we invite you from now to follow the showcase page on LinkedIn, on which we will highlight our own content, but also encourage PDBs to share their content and help us recirculate what has been happening, because a lot is happening in that field already that is not yet at the top of the agenda. So in order to do that, and I'll put the link at the bottom, we'll ask you to complete a survey to indicate your existing experience in this field, but also your ability to contribute in terms of what you can share as experience, your need for support, and your interest in joining and perhaps carrying out some of the analytical work that we will be launching. We'll keep a regular schedule of quarterly meetings to report on progress and to hear from your experience. And we will continue, of course, to have high visibility in international fora with our analytical work. I'm glad to report that the next event will be in Cairo as part of the Union for the Mediterranean meeting on water finance. We will hold a session specifically dedicated to the work of PDBs in the Mediterranean region on water. And in the next stage of our work, we will need to define a governance and results framework in which we will be looking for active participants as part of the governance. So we won't have a system of chair and co-chair, but we really want to encourage participants to come forward and to volunteer for specific roles. As Lionel mentioned, this will be complementary with the existing work of the OECD on water finance and economics. We do, and this is part of my team in the Environment Directorate, a lot of analytical work. So we are carrying out some analytical work on water-related risks, for example, for central banks, which is coming out this October. We will make sure that the theme of Public Development Bank is very core to the roundtable on financing water that we are organizing next year in the run-up to the UN Water Conference on financing freshwater restoration, as I mentioned, but also on the financial materiality of water-related risks that we're conducting with the Bank of Spain, and on equitable water financing. And we will include that theme in the policy dialogues at country level that we are conducting. So we just completed one in Mongolia, for example. We have a number that are ongoing in Asia, but in Egypt, there's been some interest expressed in working on water financing for Egypt and placing this issue of public development banks right at the center of that dialogue. So that's my concluding slide. Please complete the survey. This is a QR code that you can scan with your phone. We checked it works. So please get your phones out to scan this QR code, and we will circulate the presentation in which you will be able to access it. This is a very short survey, but it will help us understand your needs and also how you can contribute. And then there's also a link here to the showcase page on LinkedIn. So the pages, the website of the Water Finance Coalition will continue to be there as a repository of information, but all new content will be put on this showcase page. So please follow that page so that you can be kept up to date with our new content. So thank you very much for your attention. And with that, I think it will be very useful to hear from our PDB colleagues about what their experience has been, and perhaps reflect as well on how they can contribute to this initiative and or benefit from it. So I'd like to pass the floor to Nathalie Layani from the Caisse des Dépôts, and she can tell us about her experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Good morning or good afternoon to all. Well, it's a great pleasure to speak with you today about the commitment of Caisse des Dépôts Group and its Bank of Territories and on water projects. Just a few words about Caisse des Dépôts Group. As you probably know, it's a national public development bank financed mainly by savings, French citizens' savings. So we are kind of also a sovereign wealth fund. As Sophie said it, of course, water is one of the most vital common goods of our time, but it is also increasingly under threat, not only in southern countries, but also in northern countries, especially in France. In France, projections show that available water resources may decrease by 30 to 40% by 2050. And at the same time, demand for water is rising with a projected increase of 55% by 2050 compared to 2022. So, of course, as a national development bank and a sovereign wealth fund, Caisse des Dépôts Group had to integrate it in its strategy, but I will precise why and how. So one of the reasons why we developed services and financing on water issues is because it became a national challenge, as I put it before, requiring blended finance and not only subsidies stemming from the national budget. Today, France invests around 7 billion euros per year in water infrastructure that tremendously need renovation and refurbishment because they are getting old, simply. But the actual need is closer to 15 billion euros annually. And as highlighted by the Finance in Common report, national public development banks are uniquely positioned to close this gap. It was very well presented by my colleagues. Well, they provide long-term affordable finance, they take on risks that commercial banks often cannot take, and they offer technical expertise, which is quite important for municipalities to support project preparation and capacity building. So in short, they're essential catalysts for achieving Sustainable Development Goal 6, as it was said before, but also the Paris Agreement objectives, because, of course, as you know, water is very much linked to adaptation issues. So this is exactly the role of Caisse des Dépôts in France to close this gap through, so as I said, our bank dedicated to territories. We act as a mission-driven public bank, but we also work closely with the European partners, in particular the European Investment Bank. And together we have established financing envelopes of 1 billion euros in 2021 and 500 million euros in 2023. These funds are specifically designed to support small and medium-sized local projects, including water and sanitation networks, urban renewal, and climate adaptation investments. And so at least half of these envelopes are dedicated to projects that directly mitigate or adapt to climate change. The second reason why Caisse de dépôt chose to be active in the water sector is because we identified water and water scarcity as a significant risk, and we also identified dependencies in our portfolio to water resources, clean water resources, of course. Our activities, our asset portfolio, especially in the building sector, proved to be highly dependent on water resources, but other sectors in which we invest also. And this is something that came up in our CSRD analysis. I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but this risk appeared as a materiality. Some of our activities are exposed to physical risks such as drought and floods, but also to transition risks, regulatory changes linked to European water directives. So that is why we also chose to adopt a strategy on water, a policy aimed at reducing our negative impacts on water resources in terms of quantity and quality, and also to increase our positive impacts through our dedicated financing to the water sector. So this leads me to the what and the how. How do we finance water projects in France? Well, concretely, we built up a continuum of services in the framework of an integrated program called Aquagir, which is both a program and an online platform. And our vision is to mobilize 4 billion euros by 2028, nearly doubling our annual commitments compared to the period between 2019 and 2022. And with this envelope, we aim to support around 1,600 water and sanitation projects, which represents nearly 370 million euros of financing each year. But Aquagir is not only about financing, it is about integrated support for territorial actors. The Banque des Territoires, the Bank of Territories in France, assists municipalities and their public apparatus with project design and structuring, which is quite important in that sector. This includes territorial engineering, master plans for drinking water, sanitation, and stormwater, as well as pre-operational and operational studies, for example, on wastewater reuse. We also invest in equity alongside public and private partners in semi-public companies. To give you concrete examples, we invested in Aquasys, which develops integrated and dynamic water resource management, and in Aqua Robotics, which designs autonomous robots to inspect pressurized water networks. But the program also supports local municipality projects through AquaPrêt, through loans, I would say concessional loans, with maturities of up to 60 years, indexed on what we call in France the Livret A, which is a saving program. So it is indexed on this Livret A rate plus 0.4%, which can be considered as a concessional. It finances all types of water resources management initiatives, sanitation, the missions, responsibilities of municipalities, and the preservation of restoration of wetlands and aquatic ecosystems. In addition, we promote sustainable agricultural practices in sensitive catchment areas, and we support the reduced use of pesticides, which is quite connected to water resources management. And finally, we created a dedicated online platform for local authorities to better understand, engage with, and advance their water projects, which is called aquagir.fr. And since 2025, this platform has offered an innovative digital and free decision support tool, enabling these territories to visualize the state of water resources in their territory, anticipate future developments, and better understand the impacts of climate change on water resources. So, well, in short, Aquagir is a comprehensive program that combines all aspects of services that are needed by territories on water management. The results are already tangible. In 2025, more than 25 million people benefited from our water and sanitation programs, and increase of nearly 30% compared to 2023. To conclude, I want to underline a very simple message, but I think you got it. Water is the foundation of resilient territories and healthy economies, and in that field, as well as in adaptation field, well, non-action is much more expensive than acting now to preserve and refurbish water infrastructure, invest in reuse, innovation, and all projects connected to water management. But securing these resources requires long-term investment, technical expertise, and risk sharing. So this is at the crux of our PDBs missions. I hope this was of interest to you, and I'm ready to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Many thanks, Nathalie. This was very impressive and great to hear that in France this has been prioritized. Even though we may think that most water needs are met, but they're not. There's a big need for refurbishment and tackling climate adaptation and mitigation. So we'll now move to South Africa with Johan Lube so that we can hear from South Africa's experience. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Can I just confirm that you can see my slides? Perfect. Great. Thank you very much, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. So I'm Johan Lube. I'm from the Water Partnerships Office in South Africa. It's an initiative that has been established by the Department of Water and Sanitation as the custodian of water in South Africa, in partnership with the Development Bank of Southern Africa. For those that know, in South Africa, the mandate for water services lies with municipalities. We are, however, quite constrained in terms of investment-ready opportunities in the water sector. So the need sits with municipalities, but there isn't always funding. There's limited skills, capacity, expertise to create opportunities for investment in the water sector. On the other hand, we've got the private sector. We've got lots of money in the private sector. There's skills, capacity, expertise in the private sector, but we don't have the mechanisms to match the two. And that's really the role of the Water Partnerships Office, is to support municipalities to create opportunities for private sector participation, whether that's through investment or just capacity and skills and expertise to come in. So we're looking at things from a programmatic perspective. We've got 6 programs, and I'll quickly run through them with you. The idea with the programmatic approach is really to develop standardized approaches, documentation, mechanisms that we can then more easily and cost-effective and quicker prepare projects and opportunities. Municipalities often work in silos. We often reinvent the wheel, and that makes it very difficult for the private sector to participate. So the standardized programs is firstly a non-revenue water program, which is designed to support municipalities to reduce their non-revenue water, reduce physical losses, improve revenues. The mechanism that we are looking at to fund and engage with the private sector is through performance-based contracts. Second program is the water reuse program, which is further treating advanced municipal wastewater. Also looking at generating energy from the facilities, beneficiating the sludge. Typical model there is a typical project finance or PPP mechanism. to engage the private sector on the water reuse program. We've also secured funding from the GCF, $235 million, to help us to prepare water reuse projects and also a concessional loan component to go into the implementation of the projects. A wastewater treatment program. We don't always have a reuse opportunity. In many cases, we just need to make sure that the water is treated to the right quality before it's discharged into the environment. And this program is focusing on upgrading, rehabilitating, refurbishing wastewater treatment facilities. Our non-sewage sanitation program is designed to scale the non-sewage sanitation or water efficient sanitation solutions across the country. Typically projects, informal settlements, schools, but also private sector developments, on looking at it on a decentralized manner. For that program, we've secured some funding from the Gates Foundation to really help us to scale these projects across the country. Our seawater desalination program is looking at procuring large volumes of desalinated seawater from the private sector, typically through IWP or PPP models, and that will be rolled out for our coastal cities. And then the last program is more on bringing private sector capacity in to help municipalities with the functioning of their water business, and bringing that skills and expertise in. So just quickly on each one of the programs, showing some of the projects that we are working on. Our non-revenue water program, the program has been designed, so we've got standardized documentation models available. We're also working on designing a non-revenue water guarantee instrument. Private sector often require guarantees if they want to contract with municipalities. Our national government is not providing that, so we're looking at setting up separate initiatives to support those projects. We're also working on a pre-qualification of PVC contractors, and then a number of projects that you can see on the list there is to design performance-based contracts in some of these municipalities, and that will then go into procurement of PVC contractors. Our water reuse program also building on the pipeline there. Most of the projects are still at a relatively early stage and will have to go through a preparation process. Some projects there, the first one is a PPP project. Some of you might be aware in eThekwini Metro, that's the RFP has closed, and we're looking at supporting with concessional loan funding there. Maybe just quickly, lastly, on the other programs, building a pipeline of wastewater treatment works, seawater desalination. We're busy designing the program with support from the IFC. Non-sewage sanitation, looking at identifying potential projects where we can roll out water efficient sanitation solutions. Also working with the City of Cape Town and eThekwini on some pilots. And then lastly, on the management contracts, we're designing a management contract for the City of eThekwini, and that will be used as a model to be rolled out to other municipalities and other metros as well. Thanks, Sophie. I'll hand back to you. I hope I haven't rushed too much, but just aware of the time, so I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Johan, and thank you for keeping to time. That's much appreciated. Great to see how you've segmented as well the market and identified all these different, product line in some way. And also was interested to hear about your collaboration with IFC. So that gives us a sort of segue with Juan's presentation that will tell us more about how an MDB can collaborate as well with PDBs. Over to you, Juan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, can you see the slides in the screen already? Perfect. Okay, so well, thanks a lot, the OECD, AFD, for this invitation to participate in this exciting launching the revamping or whatever you want to call it of the Water Finance Coalition. I was very happy participating during these 5 years in the Water Finance Coalition. As Lionel said, we were one of the institutions that pushed for it, not as much as AFD being chair, of course, but we were trying also to participate, and we found always very, very useful these reports, these capacities, and showing what we do, no, in order to improve water financing through PDBs. So for those who probably, well, if you don't know AAB, just a quick word: we are the bank of the EU. We are the shareholders are 27 members of the EU. And in relation to water, just to mention that if we compare it with the annual turnover or the annual financing that we provide, last year we provided around 90 million in 90 billion, sorry, in all financing that we provide. So what and last year we provided 4 billion in water. So basically it's varying from 3 to 5%. But as I will show you, we want to do more, and also of course using the help of the PDBs. Let me move to the next slide. Yeah, so it was already mentioned before. I don't want to extend much. There's a global crisis in relation to water. A couple of data that you probably heard. It was the UN published that the demand for fresh water is expected to exceed currently the sustainable supply by about 40% only next future, so in 2030, so it's tomorrow. Basically, every year we see the huge losses that water events or extreme water events are causing. For example, last year in my country, in Spain, it was a disaster in Valencia, in this area. But for example, if we can account from 2080 until 2023, 738 billion in losses only. So we see also that the World Economic Forum published that 5 out of the 10 biggest business risks are related to water. So as you can see, 50% of the risks are related to water. And it's also for us, and as I said, that we are the EU bank, it's also an opportunity for European companies, European industry, because the EU has been developing a lot in this over the last years. No, so 40% of the global water technology patents are from the EU. So in line with in the 4th of June, the Commission launched the water resilience strategy, and that one. Us being the EU bank, we launched another program that is backing this in this strategy. It's like the financial arm of this strategy. So the 3 main priorities of this program, and I think it's relevant because you will see that PDBs are there as well. First is to deliver access to safe water inside and outside the EU. So we're not only restricted to inside the EU, and also improving the service quality, these non-revenue water programs that were mentioned, the efficiency in order to reduce the electricity consumption of the systems, and of course the pollution control. And we have a very relevant point in here with emerging concern contaminants, for example, PFAS. Last year we financed a project in order to remove PFAS from wastewater. So also the second pillar of this program is to increase water resilience. It was mentioned before by Natalie and the colleagues that the water is a key pillar or the keystone of climate adaptation, as we can see. So out of the 4 billion of the projects that we finance in water, most of it is linked to adaptation. No? And also with a specific point here with the flood protection, that drought resilience, and also wastewater reuse, for example, no? In order to address the droughts. And the last pillar of our this program is to support the EU water sector. This means, it doesn't mean to prioritize or to favor EU companies outside the EU with procurement. We're not going to do that, but it's true that we will look at projects in the way that, okay, does it have an EU angle in supply, in construction possibilities? As I said, without favoring directly, but just trying to choose exactly or to choose the projects that are allowing the EU water sector to be more competitive. So what's the goal? The goal we have here is to raise 15 billion. So finance 15 billion projects in the next 3 years, including 2025. If we compare with the last 3 years, we see that we will increase by 50%. So the idea is last year we financed 4, but the years before we financed a total of 10. So basically it's to increase significantly our financing in the water sector. By that, we want to do it by investing in large water resilience infrastructure. So meaning we are targeting to do more operations, but even with a higher cost. That's the idea. But at the same time, to support smaller municipalities. And to do that, utilities and firms, and to do that, we are going to, it's specifically mentioned in the program, use intermediated lending. And the only way, so one key part of this intermediated lending is, for example, with CDC, that was mentioned by Natalie, or with other public development banks, national development banks. And I will show you one case, the last slide, that what we're doing currently in this regard. Also, PDBs will also be quite relevant. Our idea is to maintain, as I said, the EU leadership with RDI loans, venture capital funds, which is something also very interesting for example, for reducing the emerging contamination, for pollution, and of course providing some accompanying our projects with water advisory. So what have we done in terms of PDBs? We have done a lot, to be honest, in terms of intermediate lending, mostly in the EU. As Natalie said, the CDC example is a great one. But if now we're looking at this also from the perspective of the national development banks outside the EU. And in this case, I have 2 examples that are signed very recently. So, for example, BDE, the Banco de Desarrollo de Ecuador, is a loan of 100 million intermediated with this National Development Bank. And we are now signing the second line because the first one is already exhausted, it's already completed. And also we signed, we are going to sign soon, sorry, it's not signed yet, but it's approved by our board, significant loan, as you can see, 300 million for the BNDES, Banco de Desarrollo of Brazil, in order to finance water and sanitation. And why do we do this? It was already mentioned by Sophie. PDBs understand the local context, the regulation and needs. They can reach small scale projects, and this is very important because we cannot finance a project of 1 million euros. We have to do it through someone who knows what is needed. And it can combine EIB funds with national public funds. So we have to finance always with somebody. We rarely finance 100% of the project. So this is very useful. And of course, can support the final beneficiaries with the need they need, whatever they need. They identify the need, and these national development banks, public development banks can you help with technical assistance. So finally, I have 3 minutes, sorry. So this is the project that I wanted to show you. It's a project in Ecuador. BDE, Banco de Desarrollo de Ecuador. So basically, you can see the benefits here. For me, the main benefit is that we can finance a lot of projects, basically, using a national development bank. It works like this. The municipality prepares the project with the assistance of Banco de Desarrollo de Ecuador, and then they send us the project and ask us if we can finance it. And we say yes, usually, because the projects are very well prepared by BDE. So then we finance them. Yeah, we're talking about projects of 2 million, 3 million, 10 million sometimes, but basically what we do is we want to reach maximum possible number of beneficiaries. So basically here we're financing 50 municipalities with 31 components. So basically it's 31 sub-projects, you want to call it, in the whole range of water supply, sanitation projects, and stormwater management. And with that, we're targeting, this is the estimation we have right now, about half a million people in terms of benefits with new water supply or improved sanitation. Also, employment is quite relevant. So this is a very good example, and we want to repeat it. We are doing that. We are going to sign the second line exactly the same with this, like this, because the demand is huge. And Ecuador is only one example. We have Brazil, we have many other places. Of course, we have Europe. In Europe, the projects are different, as Natalie mentioned with CDC, the projects are not first-time water supply. It's improvement of the water supply or improvement of the energy consumption. This kind of, let's say, more technical projects, but still very necessary. So this is it from my side. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any question if there's time. I'm afraid there's only 2 minutes, but many thanks.
Thank you. There was actually one question from Steph Smets at IRC, whether the loans are concessional or fully commercial, the ones that you've been doing with BDE and the NDS?
Okay. The loans are really, are not fully concessional, are, let's say, partially concessional because we have a very, very low interest rate. But that's true when we go with BDE. BDE provides sometimes a grant from the government. So our part is a loan, let's say subsidized, partially subsidized. But it's true that coming with us, BDE can go to the government and say, okay, let's also provide one part of the one grant accompanying our line of credit. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you very much. You've done all an excellent job at keeping to time. So I think we've packed in a lot of excellent experience in this session, and it's great to see already, the collaborations that have been happening between EIB and CDC, and the willingness that you have to expand that in other countries, particularly as part of the EU Water Resilience Strategy, which, as you mentioned, is global in scope. It's not limited to the EU. So there is a real willingness to increase the size of the water investments, as we heard from all of your institutions, all banks represented here, AFD, CDC, DBSA, and EIB. So we hope to be able to support those efforts, and we look forward to hearing from you either through the showcase page or through the survey, all of you online, and we will be expanding, the network so that we can meet the needs and facilitate these efforts as best as we can. Thank you very much. It's been a great session, and we look forward to continuous engagement. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.